Hello, everyone. You're listening to Crunch Squad. It's a podcast within a podcast wherein we break down the mechanics, the rules, and the number crunching behind this wonderful game of Dungeons and Dragons. I'm Ned, your host for Crunch Squad, and today I'm joined by...
Thomas, your co-host for anything.
Yes, just eager to step up wherever possible.
Always I am.
And most eager when we get to talk about really nerdy, really nitty-gritty kind of detail stuff.
Woo!
And the nerdy, nitty-gritty details that we're talking about today are those related to the Satyr race.
Yes, we're in Season 2 here, so, spoilers for the first, 5 minutes of Season 2 of ICF, where one of our players is playing a Satyr. You know how we do these episodes. If someone's playing the race, we're probably going to cover it. So, Satyrs.
Yes.
And probably important to cover Satyrs first, it being prominent portion of Season 2 here.
Yes. The version of the Satyr we're going to be talking about today is that which is presented in Mordenkainen Presents Monsters of the Multiverse. I know in the past when we've talked about some of these updated races, particularly when we talked about the Kobold, we kind of compared and contrasted the original Kobold with the new Kobold because there were some pretty meaningful differences there. With the Satyr, they're not huge differences, and I think all the changes that they made are just net positives in this new version. So
yes.
And again, like last campaign, Fleeple actually switched between the two different types of kobolds, so it made sense to discuss both of those. But in this one, Ataraxia is just the new Satyr, so that's the one we're going over today.
Yeah, of course. We've got our stuff up here to talk about them and how Satyrs might have traditionally portrayed in the past, and how we're excited that they're going to be portrayed here by our one and only Ned.
Yes, there are some mechanics here that definitely make Satyrs a very good choice for playing a bard, but we'll get to those when we get to those. The first thing we're going to talk about is the fact that the Satyr is not a humanoid creature type, it is a fey creature type.
Big distinction there.
Yes.
Huge.
It's only been within the past couple years that Wizards of the Coast has allowed player races to be anything other than humanoid.
Yeah.
And this has some interesting ramifications that come along with it. Well, I guess to kind of bring it to the basics, there are specific codified creature types in Dungeons and Dragons. Everything is going to be a humanoid or a dragon or a giant or an aberration, etc., etc. Satyrs are a fae. The places where this is going to be most apparent as far as mechanical differences between being a humanoid or something else is, I think, in spell effects.
Yes.
A couple examples of how playing a fey creature is going to differ from playing a humanoid creature. The first one that came to mind for me is the spell Hold Person.
Mm-hmm.
The way that this reads out, it says, choose a humanoid that you can see within range, and that is where the first distinction is made. It has to be a humanoid specifically. Satyrs, being fays, are immune to Hold Person. You have to use Hold Monster if you want to get the same effect on a Satyr.
Because Monster encompasses everything in D&D when it comes to creature types, but as you just said, Hold Person is equivalent to the humanoid creature type at that point, yeah?
Yeah, so Hold Monster, it says choose a creature that you can see within range. That is anything with a stat block, anything with a character sheet. And this is something you'll see reflected not just in Hold Person, but you've also got Charm Person and Dominate Person. Those don't affect Satyrs. You have to go for Charm Monster or Dominate Monster. And in all of these instances, the monster version of the spell is 3 casting levels higher than the person level of the spell.
Yeah, so if Hold Person is, what is that, a
second level? Yeah.
Second level, and so Hold Monster is 5th level is what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And it takes forever. That takes a long time to be able just to start learning 5th level spells. A lot of leveling up from when you can start almost immediately in the first 3 levels being able to cast level 2 spells, trying to jump all the way up to level 5 spells.
And another area where this is going to be distinct for Satyrs, these are some spells that don't affect normal humanoids but do affect Satyrs. There's a whole bunch of them, but a few that come to mind are the spells that end with evil and good. You've got Detect Evil and Good, Dispel Evil and Good, Protection from Evil and Good. And in fact, calling back to our second episode of Season 2, we ran into an interesting moment with the spell Protection from Evil and Good, where Max tried to cast protection from evil and good to defend the prisoners from from Ignis.
Oh no, yeah, Ignis, Lieutenant.
Yes, the Lieutenant. And we got into this conversation about how Aasimars technically aren't celestials, they are humanoids. But this is an instance where, here's the wording of the spell: until the spell ends, one willing creature you touch is protected against certain types of creatures, aberrations, celestials, elementals, fae, fiends, and undead. So if Max had cast that against somebody that I was trying to attack, then that would have worked.
Yeah. So might have to, maybe we will and maybe we won't let Jacob know about that distinction here, depending on what we want to happen moving forward in campaign 2.
Max is entirely loyal to his captain, and I trust him implicitly.
I mean, that's very, very true, actually. So from what we've seen from the first 2 to 3 episodes already at this point. Now you bring up there's a lot of distinction here, and I think it's on purpose, right? It clearly is on purpose, which is because they proofread all this stuff hundreds of times probably. And so you might be thinking like, well, that's really overpowered, which it kind of is for somebody playing a satyr, to being able to not have these certain spells affect them at such a low level. But if you think about, and we don't necessarily have to get into the mythology here, but if you think about the Feywild, thematically, it makes a lot of sense, right? Charm person, the Feywild is all about, like, I always perceive the Feywild in my mind as just like trickery and like mysticism and like very Alice in Wonderland like, right? Where things could very easily seem like they're upside down when they're right side up, and etc. And so being able to slip out from these quote unquote basic spells seems very much in line with the Fey and the Feywild. Yeah,
so thematically it makes a lot of sense. But again, we have to remember that this is a two-edged sword. While there are some of those more typical spells we might be familiar with that don't affect ataraxia, there are some other spells that do affect ataraxia, like planar binding, for example.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. With this spell, you attempt to bind a celestial, an elemental, a fae, or a fiend to your service.
Oh, wow.
So ataraxia can't get hold person, but he can get planar bound. That's a little bit of a drawback there.
Don't mind me. I'm not writing anything down as the DM
not at all.
here. So not at all. Not at all. Of course not.
So these are things that you have to be aware of. It's nice not to be affected by some of those more common spells, but if you have a tricky DM, then you might have to stay on your toes.
Well, and that's just kind of the cost of doing business for interdimensional travelers at that point, between the Feywild dimension and the material plane dimension, right? So any sort of, or not dimension, planar travel, I should say. Apologies. But yeah, that's just kind of like the cost of doing business at that point, of being like, hey, I have all this cool stuff I'm bringing from my plane, but I'm very susceptible to certain things on your plane at that point. Yeah,
there is the one other little benefit that they have. I'm going to skip forward a little bit in our list of features. We've covered one feature so far. Oh boy.
Oh yeah. Here we go.
So the next feature I want to talk about is magic resistance. You have advantage on saving throws against spells.
Period.
End of sentence.
That's a lot better than the half-elf and elf ability of like against like charm, which is like sleep and things like that. But this is just against spells, period.
Yeah, so that takes something like our planar binding, which is pretty nasty if you end up failing your charisma saving throw, but you have advantage on that charisma saving throw to hopefully not be enslaved to somebody for a certain amount of time. 24 hours is what it is? Yeah, 24 hours.
Yeah, I think so. I think it is 24 hours. But this is really cool, and as you mentioned, it makes a lot of sense why a satyr and a bard could go well together, not only thematically and from like what I'm viewing as like Greek mythology, right, and how I perceive satyrs in history, but also as the bard, you don't have to buff yourself, and you can have advantage on all these spells against you, and you can just start buffing you, and you can keep the focus on buffing your party up.
Yeah, I don't have to worry as much about that fireball as I would if I weren't a satyr. I can a bit more easily potentially take the brunt of some of those spells, so I can be up there helping out my friends, which is nice.
Yeah, I just love the idea of like the mist of the Fae like helps you dodge out of the way or like blinks you out of existence for like a tiny moment to take half damage or fully miss an effect, right? Because like that trickery and like, tee, I'm Fae.
Yeah, or to be able to like see into the weave a little bit, to be like, oh, I see where this is coming from, and to be able to have a little bit more of a heads up on it.
Yeah. Ooh, seeing into the weave might be fun with Malamar. I said Malamar's no. Dang it! With the lieutenant's class as well.
Yeah.
Which we'll get to on a future Crunch Squad.
Yeah, that's going to be a very exciting episode.
That will be an exciting episode.
Now, a couple pretty boring things about the satyr. Size, you are medium. Yeah, pretty average.
Yeah.
But I did make Ataraxia young, so I could still have a weird little guy. That is my brand at this point. Speed. Your walking speed is 35 feet. This is something that is pretty distinctive.
That is.
The vast majority of playable races in 5e have a 30-foot walking speed. There's a couple that get down to 25. I looked through, and there's maybe like a half dozen races that have a 35-foot walking speed. There's only one race that has a higher walking speed, and that is the Centaur at 40 feet.
Which, that's huge and would make sense because they're a Centaur.
So this is nice, again, for a bard that, might need to try and get around the field a little bit quicker to try and get closer to somebody so they're within range of a healing word or something. But if you just really want to double up on stuff, maybe you play a Satyr Monk and you add their speed increases to the one that you've already got.
Dude, a Satyr Monk would be nuts.
Mm-hmm.
You imagine just like using your hooves as like your unarmed strikes?
Yeah, and that actually ties in with the next ability we got here, the ramming ability. Something we probably won't see Ataraxia using a ton, I would imagine, but you can use your head and horns to make unarmed strikes. When you hit with them, the strike deals 1d6 plus your strength modifier bludgeoning damage instead of the bludgeoning damage normal for an unarmed strike, which, as a reminder, is just 1 plus your strength modifier.
Yes, that's huge. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So like you're really good in a bar brawl, basically, in a tavern brawl.
Yeah. And the monk, they do pretty quickly surpass this damage as they level up. But even then, like a monk at level 1 only deals 1d4 for their unarmed strikes. So
that's correct.
If you play a satyr monk, you can get that extra boost to your unarmed strike with your horns right from the very beginning.
Yeah, so really helpful at lower levels there, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, we already talked about magic resistance, which in my opinion is probably the best ability that the satyr has.
I think by far. Absolutely by far magic resistance against everything.
The next one we've got is Mirthful Leaps, which we saw featured in our battle against the Sahuagin. Maybe not so much to Ataraxia's advantage, but here's how this one works. Whenever you make a long jump or a high jump, you can add a d8. You can roll a d8 and add the number rolled to the number of feet you cover, even when making a standing jump. This extra distance costs movement as normal.
Which, on a ship, maybe come into handy here and is something good to try and bank on to make distance across those obstacles or from one part of the ship to the other, right? Or to go up the mast or down the mast, For sure. And as a refresher on the way that jumping works in D&D 5e, we've got long jumps and we've got high jumps. The way that both of these works, there's a difference if you're doing a standing jump or if you have a bit of a head start on it. So if you get a 10-foot running start before you make the jump, if it's a long jump, then you can jump a number of feet equal to your strength score, not your strength modifier, your strength score. Yeah.
So if you are a really strong barbarian who has 20 in your strength, you can, sort of back up 10 feet and then jump 20 feet straight up. Or if you don't want to take that extra 10 feet, a standing long jump is half that distance. So they can still jump. You can still jump 10 feet horizontally just from standing position, which is maybe a little bit unrealistic, I'll admit.
Yeah. Now, I won't go too far into this because it's a season 1 callback, but underneath Candlekeep, there's I won't spoil much here, if anything, but there's a moment to where we have to cross some bridges, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't believe, Ned, that you and the other 2 players found the other bridge across that I had actually established. I think you just found the one and went with it, but it was a running jump just pit into the abyss, where I was like saying, well, they'd have to do a running jump and a long jump. So you saying that brought me back to season 1 with those mechanics, because I had to look them up and be like, how long should the bridge be? What's their strength scores, et cetera, et cetera. And
yeah. The high jump is similar. It's also based off of your strength modifier this time, not strength score. When you get a 10-foot running start, you can jump straight up into the air a number of feet equal to 3 plus your strength modifier. So again, if you've got a maxed out strength of 20, that's an 8-foot running high jump, and then half of that height if you don't do the running head start. Now, the thing that's really cool with the Satyr's Mirthful Leap is you roll this d8, and that's the number of feet you add regardless of whether it's a running jump or a standing jump. So Ataraxia could be standing completely still, and what's his strength modifier? -1. Ataraxia is not very strong. So just as a base standing high jump, he can jump 2 feet, but if he uses his Mirthful Leap and rolls a 8 on the d8, he can just jump 10 feet straight up into the air.
Into the air. Just by doing nothing, being like, "Whoa!"
Yeah.
Like getting jostled and straight up.
Yeah, and if he gets a running start on a long jump, his strength score is 9. If he gets an 8, even though he's got a -1 modifier to his strength, he can make a 17-foot long jump if he rolls well enough.
That's crazy. I mean, when you do, anybody's played D&D, which you probably have if you're listening to this, and you see how long 15 feet is, it doesn't look far to like move, but to jump, you're like, that can be quite a big distance and can overcome certain obstacles for sure.
So nice little ability to have. Maybe one of these days it'll work out for me.
Just the luck of the dice.
Yes. And then the last feature we're going to go over here, this is one that ties pretty directly into the Satyr being a good class for bards, is Reveler. As an embodiment of revelry, you have proficiency in the performance and persuasion skills, and you have proficiency with one musical instrument of your choice.
And there we go. Absolutely. That's where you're going to double down in the bard.
So this was great for a couple reasons as I was getting my character ready to play for this campaign. In addition to the 3 instruments I already got proficiency with as a bard, I get a 4th one on top of that, but also the bard has a pretty nice list of skills you can choose from to get proficiency with, and because I already had performance and persuasion from being a satyr, that left other slots open for me to take from my bard proficiencies.
Yeah, just making yourself really doubling down on that jack of all trades kind of ability. Not that you get the actual ability, but like the idea of like being a jack of all trades with your proficiency, that you really are focusing in on the knowledge of the world and making sure you know a little bit of everything to some intense degree.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about the jack of all trades feature that the bard gets when we do that episode later on. But for now, that's about it for the Satyr.
Now, there is another Satyr that was published in D&D books. I don't think we'll go into really anything about this since what we just presented is going to be one of the official options moving forward and what we're using in Season 2. But there was a book, The Mythic Odysseys of Theros, which was a Magic the Gathering crossover, I believe.
Correct.
At the time. And it's an official Magic the Gathering world set in D&D with all of the mechanics, and it's very Greek mythology based, where you're dealing with like the stars and like the Greek chorus and those mythic animals at that point, the Minotaur, the Satyr, and things like that.
Yeah, which incidentally, when we get into some more details about Ataraxia, when we talk about his subclass, this comes from a book called Odyssey of the Dragon Lords, which actually is the same book that I got Fleeple's subclass from when we talked about that earlier in Campaign 1. Odyssey of the Dragon Lords is another Greek mythology-themed book from a separate publisher, but the people who wrote that book are now writing books for Wizards of the Coast. So they know what they're doing.
Are they really?
They are, yes.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah, the Chains of Asmodeus adventure that was released exclusive on DM's Guild was written by the same people who did Odyssey of the Dragon Lords.
Oh my gosh, well there you go. Ned knows how to pick them out before they get picked up by Wizards of the Coast. Wizards of the Coast, this is your guy. That's all I'm saying, okay?
Yeah.
Come at Ned Wilcock here.
Yeah. And, they just picked up also Matt Colville's MCDM monster books on D&D Beyond, and I was on that Kickstarter beforehand, so...
See, there we go. You see, this guy knows what he's talking about. He knows. That's why he's the Crunch Squad expert here, folks. You heard it here.
You heard it here. And I believe that's all you're going to be hearing from us today, but we're very excited to dig into more of the details of these new characters. I'm very excited about Ataraxia's abilities, but also very excited to talk about some of our other friends' abilities as well. Divination Wizard, amazing. Echo Knight Fighter, amazing. Monster Hunter Ranger, amazing. We're going to have a grand time digging into the Crunch this campaign.
Yeah, everything's a real banger here in Season 2, not only in the subclasses and what we're going to be able to try. I mean, we've got completely new abilities from Season 1 for all the players. Everyone's pretty much chosen, not opposite, but definitely completely different. There's really kind of no double dipping at all on abilities and spell lists even here. So it's going to be a ton of fun to be able to experience all these new elements.
Indeed it will. And with that, thank you everybody so much for listening to this week's episode of Crunch Squad. We hope you've enjoyed listening as much as we've enjoyed geeking out and being, just the geeky men in the corner that we are. Now, from wherever you get your podcast, please leave us a review. It helps boost our ratings throughout each podcast service. It puts our show in other people's recommended feeds, and it lets us know you like what we're doing, and it also gives us a warm feeling in our hearts. And that is perhaps the most important reason.
It's the biggest reason to help keep us going forward, that's for sure.
Yeah, we've been honestly kind of flummoxed by the amount of ratings that we've been getting since we started Campaign 2, and our egos would love to see more of them. So, yeah, but if you want to write something a little longer than a review, you could also email us at icastfireball2020@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you, and we're hoping to get the word out there and set this podcast on fire. Now, to get the most recent up-to-date content from all of us here, please follow us on Instagram and Twitter with the handle icastfireball20. There you can get possible sneak peeks of upcoming episodes, interesting insight from the players and DM, and behind-the-scenes shots of us making this incredibly fun world.
And you've got our YouTube, of course, where we also have that same and probably the most frequent and probably easiest way to get in touch with us is through our patreon.com/icastfireball20, where we have our member exclusive Discord where you can chat with us live and every day.
Yeah, we've been seeing a lot of fun conversations happening since we launched Campaign 2. People are already getting very excited about our new characters and our new NPCs who maybe only existed for a minute of airtime.
Hashtag what's his name?
Hashtag what's his name? Never forget what's his name. Now, it is, as always, my obligation in Crunch Squad to give a shout out to my own podcast, which always feels weird. We have a sister podcast called Improv Tabletop, where I take the turn as the GM. We have our 1-month Fate Accelerated campaigns that we've been doing. They've been a lot of fun. We have some of our long-form campaigns as well. We have 2 Avatar-themed campaigns, and by the time you're listening to this, I think we'll have started recording for our next Avatar campaign that is going to be launching starting in July.
Yes, it'll be real soon to dive right back in. New cast, new era, same good old Powered by the Apocalypse system. It's the Avatar Legend system, I should say. It's going to be a blast.
Yep, and we're going to Republic City, baby. It's going to be a grand old time. So go give that a listen and prepare for some fantastical shenanigans in Varric World. Yep, a theme park all about Varric, just like Disney World. It's going to be fun.
Oh, gosh. I know I'm not alone in this, but I hope we see some pro bending. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, we will see where the characters take things. Lastly, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends and fellow wacky adventurers. But until next time, I've been Ned, your host for Crunch Squad, and today I've been joined by
Thomas, the co-host for anything people will let me co-host.
Keep the fire going, and we'll see you next time.